Watching Donald Trump doing whatever the heck he's doing is so strange. Here, he's selling a Trump cutting board. That's what he did on Labor Day, as our editor-in-chief Ron Filipkowski said. Another one of the hundreds of products Trump is selling on his website to cash in on his presidency. He always wanted to get to a point where he could put his name on anything and it would sell, but he failed at it repeatedly until his presidency, where these MAGAs buy whatever. Donald Trump is also on Labor Day selling the following. For just $49, you can get this commemorative coin of Donald Trump watching mail-in ballot drop boxes, the commemorative poll watchers coin. Could we compare that, by the way, to what Vice President Kamala Harris is doing and posting? She goes, celebrated Labor Day with workers in Detroit and Pittsburgh, both cradles of the American labor movement. Every person in our nation has benefited from the work of our brothers and sisters in the labor movement. Vice President Kamala Harris also posts the following. U.S. Steel should remain American owned and American operated. It is vital for our nation to maintain strong American steel companies. I will always have the back of America's steel workers. And then she posts, in this fight for the future, I will continue to count on the strength, determination, and leadership of union workers across our nation, because union organizing does not only win contracts, it wins elections. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was sending email after email after email to his email listserv, and he writes the following kind of weird love bombing stuff. Can we take a picture on stage together during my rally in Butler, Pennsylvania? They'll be talking about my triumphant return for generations to come, and I want you to be there when we make history. The best part, I'm paying the entire cost of your trip. It's totally free. By the way, newsflash, it isn't. It's a scam. You have to donate hundreds of dollars to Trump's campaign to be considered, and who even knows how that works. Then Donald Trump goes, I want to share every moment of it with you, Ben. I want to share every moment. Again, very strange emails. And then he sends this email. I signed this right after Kamala had me arrested. I signed this one after Marxist Kamala weaponized DOJ had me indicted again. Ben, I will always love you. So here's a small token of my appreciation. This is the same hat I wore when I was wrongfully convicted. I signed this one after Marxist Kamala's weaponized DOJ had me indicted again. What are you talking about? You were in a courtroom when you were convicted by a jury who heard all of the evidence and convicted you on 34 separate felony counts. You were not wearing the hat. You may have been sleeping because you continued to fall asleep during that criminal trial, but I digress. By the way, Donald Trump is also selling the following: official presidential pins, and you can buy this American flag with Donald Trump's name on it, the same way he disgraces buildings by slapping his name on it. Donald Trump takes our symbol of democracy in America, the American flag, and plasters Trump on it. How despicable can you get? But Vice President Kamala Harris posts, Donald Trump vows to be a dictator on day one. So let's take a look at what Lara Trump is posting on Labor Day. This is so bizarre. So this is a new music video that she's doing. And this is real. This isn't made up. This is the chair of the Republican National Committee, Lara Trump, right here. Let's play this clip. And so, folks, while all of that is going on, could we compare that just for a moment let's take a look at the speech that Governor Walz gave in Milwaukee. Here's Governor Walz. Let's play this clip.
This guy has made it clear how he stands. He's sitting down at Mar-a-Lago after he got elected president, and this was his exact quote. He's talking to a bunch of folks at Mar-a-Lago. You're rich as hell, and we're going to give you a tax cut. At the same time, he was telling workers they get paid too much already. That's who this guy is. You tell me Who in Wisconsin is sitting around saying, damn, I wish they'd give billionaires tax cuts and screw me over. Damn, I wish they'd take my health care away. I wish they'd underfund my public school. I wish they would make my job more difficult, more dangerous. And then at the end of the day, I wish they'd make me work till I'm 75 years old. No one's saying that. No one's asking for that agenda. What they're asking for is to be treated fairly with dignity. That's what we have. Look.
Here's another clip of Governor Walz right there. Let's play it.
Since the very beginning, Donald Trump has been running on the politics of fear. Look, I know something about that. I supervised the lunchroom for a bunch of years. Fear is a good short-term motivator, but it doesn't inspire people. It doesn't change their behaviors. And what I did know about that lunchroom too is the bullies who want to instill fear, they're the first ones to find out what happens when the tide turns. He's running scared now. He's running scared.
Then you had Vice President Kamala Harris speaking in Pittsburgh, where Jordy lives, with President Biden. Take a look at this.
Because, of course, that's the nature of who we are as Americans. We have dreams. We can see what is possible unburdened by what has been. We have aspirations. We have ambitions. And the system that is a good system is one that supports that and allows people the opportunity to go where they can see and imagine themselves to be. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about an opportunity economy. We fight for a future where every senior can retire with dignity. And so we will continue to defend Social Security and Medicare and pensions.
Here's another clip of Vice President Kamala Harris in Pittsburgh. Play this clip.
Donald Trump is trying to pull us backward, including back to a time before workers had the freedom to organize.
He's going to jail.
Well, the courts will handle that, and we will handle November. How about that? We'll handle November. Let the courts handle that other thing. But we're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back.
By the way, here's President Biden. Play this clip.
She'll be a historic pro-union president. So, folks, we got one more job to do together. Let me ask you. Are you ready to fight? Yeah! Are you ready to win? Yeah! Are you ready to elect Kamala Harris our next president of the United States of America? And in the process, are you ready to make Donald Trump a loser again?
And on Labor Day, I figured we'd show you this as well. As our editor-in-chief Ron Filipkowski puts it, to properly commemorate Labor Day, I bring you an example of the type of child labor that unions fought hard to eradicate. And this is Eric Trump saying he worked minimum wage jobs since he was 11 years old on construction sites, working. It's just total crap. Here, play this clip.
We ever had. We're 12 years old. We wanted a bike. Congratulations. You know, you're going out with construction guys and you're going to cut rebar on with a acetylene torch on a construction site. You're going to hop on a backhoe. You're going to dig holes. You're going to grab a chainsaw and, clear down trees from a storm. You're going to do electrical work and plumbing work. And we were on job sites at 11 years old, making minimum wage, learning a trade. And that was expected. We're expected to have good manners. We're expected.
All right, Eric, I'm sure about that. Well, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance were nowhere to be found on Labor Day, breaking with almost all tradition of what politicians do on Labor Day. But yeah, it's what they want to do. Also, I think it's worth noting that in all of the kind of major polls, Vice President Kamala Harris continues to pull ahead. Oh, let me show you this ad. They did a great job. This is Rebuild USA. Love this ad. Here, play this clip.
What are Donald Trump and his friends preparing for a second term? A little something called Project 2025. They're going to eliminate overtime. They want to scrap child labor laws, your pensions canceled, along with your retirement. These weirdos want to roll your rights back, way back. Because the truth is, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu.
there you have it, folks. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3,500,000. I was going to say 3 million, but we got to 3 million. Let's get to 4 million. Let's get to 3.5 million. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the Midas Touch newsletter at MidasTouch.com/newsletter.
Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
On today's show, Donald Trump now wants you to believe he's a champion of reproductive rights. His campaign also continues their fight with the U.S. military over Trump's visit to Arlington National Cemetery. Always a fight you want to pick. And we got a whole raft of new polls showing an extremely tight race. But first, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz sat down for their first TV interview since becoming the Democratic ticket, and the world will never be the same. That's right, it's 10 p.m. Eastern as we're recording this, about 4 hours later than we usually record, because we were not about to let this episode of Pod Save America become overtaken by events.
Knock on wood. You have no idea what's going to happen between now and 6 a.m. tomorrow.
It's okay. Yeah, well, you know what? It's 10:15 East Coast time now, so I'm willing to take my chances.
Okay,
wow,
we'll see.
How about that?
We'll
I
see.
just put it
All
out
right.
there. So anyway, we waited around for CNN to air Dana Bash's interview with Harris and Walz, which they sat down for after wrapping up a bus tour through southern Georgia. Not surprisingly, when the first excerpt of the interview dropped today, it was Dana asking Harris about why she's changed positions on some key issues from past campaigns. Let's listen.
And I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020 that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking. My values have not changed. So that is the reality of it. And 4 years of being vice president, I'll tell you, one of the aspects to your point is traveling the country extensively. I mean, I'm here in Georgia. I think somebody told me 17 times since I've been vice president in Georgia alone. I believe it is important to build consensus. And it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems.
All right, Dan, so we knew this one was coming, and so did Kamala Harris. How do you think she did?
Great. It was the right answer. She didn't get weighed down in the details of it. She didn't let Dana Bash play gotcha with her. She just laid it out on message in a way that I think is easily understood to people because, unlike politicians, people change their mind all the time, and they're allowed to do so when they get new information, have different experiences. So I think it was a good answer to a question that they have known was coming since the day she became the nominee.
That line, "my values haven't changed," she repeated several times. I saw some folks on the Harris campaign tweeting that. Clearly, like that, they wanted that to be the message that people take away from that. And basically, it's like two parts to this answer. Like, one, my values haven't changed, but, and you heard her at the end there talk about, as I've been vice president and traveled around the country, like one thing I've learned is how to build consensus. She's also trying to signal that, like, and she did this in her convention speech as well when she said, I'll be a president who's practical, who's realistic. She wants to convey that she has these deeply held values that are not changing, but in terms of how she gets to a solution, she is willing to compromise, work with other people, find consensus, which I think is pretty smart. I thought it was a great answer. I thought it's going to get her through. It got her through this interview very well. I do think that during the debate, she will probably get pushed even harder, either by the moderators or definitely by Donald Trump on some of these. Like, okay, so you change your mind. You're not for banning fracking anymore. You're not for, decriminalizing border crossings anymore. Like, what made you change your mind? Why did you change your mind? And so, I'm sure they are workshopping like one additional answer if she continues to get pushed on it. But I don't think she should have gone there during this interview, because you don't want to make the whole interview, which was 18 minutes, all about you defending your past positions or talking about why you changed your mind or whatever.
Yeah, you're going to need a specific answer for some of the specific changes. And Dana Bash tried to get her there. She was like, is there specific science you looked at? And you could see that in a debate. Although it's just hard to imagine. Trump will push her on it, but it's hard to imagine him like pushing her in the way in which Kamala Harris will probably push Trump, like in a sort of a lawyer cross-examination sort of way. He'll just probably just sort of yell at her in assert positions for her. But you're going to need some
because he doesn't know what he's talking about, which is his challenge.
He didn't understand the previous position, doesn't understand the current position. So
doesn't know what fracking is, doesn't really know what decriminalizing border crossings are. He doesn't know any of that. Yeah. So speaking of Trump, he did jump on the phrase, "My values have not changed," in a Truth Social post where he said he agreed with her. Her values haven't changed, and that, quote, "the border is going to remain open, zero fracking, et cetera, et cetera." So clearly an attempt by him to saddle Kamala with her old positions. You think that'll work?
Not him truthing about it or whatever he's going to do next. There's tens and tens of millions of dollars of money that's going to be spent on TV over the next 11 weeks here or whatever it is. And they can do that, right? Not that many people will see this interview, even though all of Washington waited for this as if it was the inauguration itself. There was so much anticipation about this interview. I mean, we're recording.
I think we had countdown clocks like earlier in the week. Yeah,
it's just people like this very seriously. And it's important. You should do interviews. She did it. It went very well. But what was said in this interview is going to be less consequential over the course of the next several months than how this argument plays out in television and digital advertising. Right? He will assert these positions. There will be ads that just simply assert that she is for banning fracking in Pennsylvania, and how you effectively push back on that is going to be key.
Yes. I do think that part of the way you push back on that is bringing the debate forward and talking about the future and what you're going to do and versus what Donald Trump's going to do. And I think she did that a lot. I think it was great too when Dana Bash asked, like, what would your priority be on day one? You know, she didn't like name a specific executive order. Executive orders are tough these days since they continue to get overturned by the Supreme Court. And she didn't even name a specific piece of legislation, but she said the middle class is my priority. Like day one, I'm going to talk about how to strengthen the middle class, how to expand the middle class. And she started talking about some of her policies that she has already proposed regarding bringing down costs of groceries, of housing, etc. And she actually got a chyron on CNN when she said this that I'm sure the campaign just loved. And the chyron just says, "Kamala Harris, day one priority is the middle class." That's like a fucking pollster's dream, Dan.
Put in an ad, people. Put in an ad.
Another question we knew was coming was how Harris feels about Trump calling her race and identity into question. Here's that exchange.
You suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
I absolutely loved that response. I'm sure there are some people who may have wanted to hear a more visceral response from her or hear her attack Trump for this. Why do you think that she and her team decided to brush it off?
Because they are smart. They have watched the last 9 years of Democratic politics and learned something, which is you cannot follow Trump down his rabbit holes. This is what he wants to talk about, right? He wants to make it about race. He wants to, if she were to respond to that, that would be the headlines of this whole piece. Not what she would do for the middle class, not how she would secure the border, any of that. It would be Harris, Trump spar over her race. And she understands, as Barack Obama did, that the best way to deal with this is to push it aside and pivot. And it can be incredibly frustrating because it is what he does is so offensive that it feels like you have to call it out. But our outrage is often his fuel. So we take it, we brush it off, which drives him fucking nuts, which is a huge bonus, and move on to something else. And she did this. The moment when I was most confident that Kamala Harris was going to be a great presidential candidate was the day when he brought up this attack at the National Association of Black Journalists Conference, and she was speaking in front of a convention of a black sorority, and she stood up there and she smiled, chuckled, and then said same old stuff and moved on. And it's like, she's got it. She has figured this out. She knows how to talk about Trump. She knows how to drive him insane. She knows how to make this campaign be on her terms, not his. I thought it was great. I loved it so much.
Donald Trump has made an entire career out of saying and doing sexist and racist and xenophobic shit. That is who he is. And every time he does it, calling it out does not do anything else. It makes the person who calls it out feel better. It probably makes a lot of us feel better who feel the same way. We're trying to win an election here by moving and persuading voters. Donald Trump was elected president saying these things already. And like you said, he would like nothing more than to have the entire campaign about her reactions to his provocations. That is what he wants. That is what his campaign wants. That is how they think they'll win. And the Harris campaign is incredibly smart in not taking the bait. And like you said, it is a lesson that has been learned over many years. I think the Biden campaign did a pretty good job of that in 2020 as well, not taking the bait. I think there were a lot of lessons learned from Hillary's campaign in 2016 before we knew what worked for Trump. So it's understandable. But I think I was very, very happy with that answer. Dana also asked Harris if she would appoint a Republican to a cabinet post. And it seemed to surprise Kamala in a pleasant way. Let's take a listen.
You had a lot of Republican speakers at the convention. Will you appoint a Republican to your cabinet?
Yes, I would.
Anyone in mind?
Yes, I would. No one in particular in mind. We got 68 days to go with this election, so I'm not putting the cart before the horse, but I would. I think it's really important. I have spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views, different experiences. And I think it would be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
So our Never Trump pal Sarah Longwell suggested on Twitter that Kamala name Mitt Romney for Treasury. What do you think about that? And then maybe it's a package deal. He's going to come with Paul Ryan as budget director.
Look, put the Paul Ryan thing aside. And I say this with all respect for Sarah Longwell, who's one of the smartest people in politics, but abso-fucking-lutely not. That is an insane
I kind of think
idea.
Sarah was just trolling us too.
If she is, I consider me trolled.
I think it was a joke.
I think the idea that we would appoint a multimillionaire private equity executive who ran on cutting taxes for the rich and raising them on the middle class as our Treasury Secretary is insane. We cannot do that. I already know what job this Republican will have. It'll be Transportation Secretary. It's always Transportation Secretary.
Like Ray
LaHood.
Who was great. We loved Ray LaHood.
Ray LaHood was great, but he was
I
our
still
Republican.
love Ray LaHood, sorry.
George W. Bush similarly appointed a Democrat to his cabinet. It was Norm Mineta, Transportation Secretary. So there was some Never Trump Republican running around out there. Maybe Trump, maybe it's like Jeff Flake or someone like that who's been drummed out of Congress by Trump, who is going to be the Transportation Secretary in 2025, guaranteed.
Make Adam Kinzinger VA Secretary.
That is another option. That's a
yeah. There's
plenty
of cabinet jobs that are not like. Look, you're not.
You can't do the big. You can't do the big.
Well. The man we worked for,
I know we did.
Defense Secretary there were a few Republicans. Defense Secretary.
We do. In hindsight, do we possibly regret that?
You know what? We'll pause here, and Rhodes and Tommy are listening. They can pick it up on Pod Save the World.
That's right.
Their thoughts on our Republican defense secretaries. Anyway, no, I think it's a great idea to do, though. It's a simple little thing, but it is an important signal to the electorate about who she is and what she stands for and how she'd govern. And it is important for her to do that more than it would have been for Joe Biden, because a lot of voters still want to know more about her before they make up their mind to vote for her. And this is a signal that she is going, and she also talked in the interview about building consensus. Voters want they want their politicians, whether you're on the left or on the right or in the center. You don't have to be a centrist to want this. There's just a vast majority of voters want their leaders to seek consensus. That's just what they want.
I assumed, based on all of the tweeting about this from various people on the Harris Walz campaign, and the fact that they put out a statement or press release sort of announcing that she said this, that this was their planned piece of news for the interview, which I thought was very smart. But now that I've watched it, it seems like...
No, it doesn't seem like it was planned because she seemed surprised.
But sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because she gave the exact right answer.
So the fun part of the interview, which Dana and CNN teased very effectively this afternoon many times by promising a TMI answer, was Harris's account of the moment Joe Biden called her to say he was dropping out. Again, Dana said, like, what were you doing? And she said, well, let me tell you, I haven't told, maybe this is TMI, too much information. And we were all left wondering, what could she have possibly been doing when the president of the United States called her to tell her he was stepping aside from the race? Let's listen.
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces. And we had just had pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle. And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it.
The puzzle is the puzzle TMI? Is the bacon TMI?
Yeah.
I thought she was going to be like, Doug was on the toilet and got the call.
Yeah, I mean, the things we already know so much about this is you already said that to me at one point, and then I pointed out to you that we already knew that Doug was at SoulCycle and then having a latte when this happened.
Yeah, that's
without his
right.
phone.
Yeah, he was at SoulCycle. He was at SoulCycle in West Hollywood, which is the SoulCycle I used to go to back in my when I first moved here.
Remember how our old friend David Axelrod used to say the last thing you want to do is bring out the cannon, and then when it goes off, it's just a little flag that says "POW" comes out. I kind of feel like that's how this was. CNN teased us so much, and then it was just a very charming story about the Vice President of the United States making bacon and doing puzzles with her niece. Like,
it wasn't
great for
TMI,
her.
it was charming. Charming is the right adjective for that story. Yeah. Anyway, that's the story. Stepping back here for a minute, because again, the TMI thing was teased. Everything was teased. There was so much conversation in Washington and in political press about this interview. We're up a good hour past our bedtimes. And when I say our bedtimes, I mean like me and you, we live on the West Coast. Still 7:30. I'm usually getting close to bed right now. What do you make of all the hysteria around this interview? She's got to do it, and then she says yes, and then but she's doing it with Walz, so it doesn't count because it's a joint interview, and then it was only 18 minutes, and what is she doing? And all this, but just the amount of ink spilled and tweets and segments on cable news. It's wild.
It really was sort of an example of the press yearning, the political press in particular, yearning for a different era, right? There's still a little like cable news consumption is changing in dramatic ways, particularly in this election. There was so much like hand-wringing about the 200 creators that were invited to the Democratic convention, as opposed to the 1,400 credentialed press.
Like us, we had badges that said
we were even though I like to think of myself as a creator, we were in the credential. We were counted in that 1,400 credentialed press.
We did walk up to many real reporters and show them our badges and say, "See, we're just like you now."
This wasn't that, yes.
Which they loved.
Which they thought was charming, as always, as they always find us.
They find us as charming as the Biden campaign.
Right. Interviews are an important part of the process, but they are a tool in which you communicate your message, right? You are not required by the Constitution to do some sort of journalistic decathlon to reach the White House. And the challenge for a lot of the press, and this has been going on for a long time, but it's kind of hit a tipping point in this election, is there was always this sort of Faustian bargain, which is, I'm going to take your really hard questions, many of whom will be process oriented and totally antithetical to what my message is or what I think the voters care about. But in exchange for that, you're going to take that interview and you're going to show it to a whole bunch of people. I need to see it. But the connection between the credibility that comes from doing that interview and the reach of that interview has been largely severed in this media environment. And so there's just like a lot of like trying too hard to make this a thing. Now, the Harris campaign waited a very long time to do their first interview. So obviously pressure was going to build. If they had done an interview a week into the campaign, then there would not have been all of this hysteria, obviously. But they obviously had a lot to do, right? They had to pick a vice president, do a convention, figure out who was going to work on the campaign, do all of that in the short period. But it does show that these sort of traditional interviews are probably going to be less of a part of the campaign than they've ever been before. And that's true on Trump's side too. All of his interviews are with Fox and Newsmax and all of that. When was the last time he's sitting down with Dana Bash, right? Or Lester Holt or any of that stuff. It's just, we're in a very, very different media environment. And I think the very insider, and even people like us, right, who've been part of this for a long time, are struggling to figure out how to think about how some of these changes are happening.
I have tried to cut down on my media criticism. I don't do it as much anymore, partly because I think a lot of the media criticism out there is, some of it's unfair. I think
a lot of it's unfair. A lot of it's unfair.
Yeah. I think most of it is ineffective. I think it's just the constant Twitter arguing about the headlines and what does the New York Times headline do. I don't want to get into it, but I think it's ineffective. But I will say on this point, it was fair to ask when she would do her first big interview, like before the convention when this first started swirling, right? But then, like a week before the convention, she says, I will schedule an interview by the end of the month, a sit-down interview. She said it to a reporter who was talking to her because she took questions as she stepped off the plane. And then she had her convention. And then after the convention, and she picked her running mate. And then after the convention, which was a very busy week where nominees typically don't do a bunch of interviews because it's the convention week.
There she is, the Vice President of the United States, and perhaps the next President of the United States.